All right. So we're live. Got a guest on again. I think we make it. People say like we make a good combo doing this, that we have to do it more often. And I guess don't need any introduction. We're going to give you one anyway. Jamie, Punch Perfect Boxing. Do you want to let them know, tell a bit about yourself? I'm sure pretty much they all know. We've seen me and you together enough times, but just in case.
Yeah, thank you, mate. Yeah, we do make a good combo. I get a lot of good
Yeah.
feedback on that. And if anyone's a big Gman fan, you'll see him on my channel regularly. So yeah, Punch Perfect Boxing, come over and subscribe. Just cover off all the boxing really. I try and put a lot of focus on a lot of the lower weight divisions as well. Try and cover a lot of Japanese boxing and stuff as well, trying to be in a bit unique. But mostly I cover the world of sport like G-Man does.
Yeah, Jamie's channel pinned it in the comments. So literally there, Punch Perfect Boxing, and he wants to go over. They can. It's been an interesting week, but
Mm.
we can talk about Fury. We can talk about White. We will. I want to preview the Valdez fight, but I want to talk because I know you're going to be away. I think you're going to that fight as well. We got to
Mhm.
talk about Canelo Bivol, and it's come across so quick, hasn't it? That it's kind of like we're already like, pretty much a fight week, and it's not felt like it.
Yeah, I said to you, didn't I, just before we logged on, that like the fact Fury White has been and gone really just seems like the boxing schedule is just flying through it. So we're already at a Canelo fight date, and with how frequently he's been fighting, it doesn't feel like we sort of missed out on him much. So it's
Oh.
definitely come around quick. And the fact I'm going to be there, and I keep mentioning it on my own channel, but I'm so excited for this.
The atmosphere is going to be great at that fight. But for me, right, we can understand why Canelo took this fight, but it's a big risk, and in many ways, like you got to tip your hat off to Canelo for this because this is a big risk with really little reward in regards to the grand scheme of things. Most people, like if I say to my friends, to me fighting Dimitri Bivol, who the hell is that? People don't really know him, and a lot of times with fans, boxing fans, casual fans, if they don't know someone, they automatically assume he's garbage because I think like people like Rocky Phil didn't know how he was garbage. They didn't know, a couple of fighters Canelo would have beat. Oh, he's garbage. Bivol is far from it. So
Hmm.
can you? I still think it's great that he's taking it, but it's a real case of this is a dangerous fight. Yeah, you get a title, but there's not much reward at the end of the day for it.
Yeah, and Canelo gets a lot of stick sometimes for his opponent choice, and I think that comes with the territory of being the pound for pound number one or the biggest name in the sport. But
Mm-hmm.
you have to give him real credit for doing this because he could have fought at 168 against a Charlo, against a Benavidez, who are good fighters in their own right. But this is a much more dangerous fight, and I think the thing for me is the fact he's going up to 175. He's done that in the past, obviously Kovalev, but there was the
Mm-hmm.
caveat of he had the rehydration clause and things like that, and it was always a way to sort of bring that down as a win for Canelo. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
this time, this isn't a washed Kovalev, this is a peak Dimitri Bivol. He's not got the rehydration clause. Canelo's given things really on Bivol's terms, obviously, apart from him being the A side, which he's always going to be. Really, really tough fight, and I commend him for taking it.
I just think stylistically, like I thought Billy Joe would be harder than it was, but I mean, the boxing ability to me. I think we some people just look at Bivol and think he's boring because the last few years he's really kind of he's fought all of his fights. I keep saying it. He's fought all his fights in third gear, but he's got a six
Mhm.
speed gearbox. If you
Yeah.
get me, he's happy to just kind of stay there. He knows he'll get it to his destination. But there's so much more to him. I mean, the footwork, the jab, the speed, the timing. I mean, Dimitri Bivol, I can see him giving Canelo absolute fits in there. And I think it might even shock Canelo when he actually gets in there how good this guy is.
Yeah, and there's definitely parts of his game that when you look at some of Canelo's recent fights, the ones where he's won them more comfortably than expected, but I look at
Mm.
that Billy Joe Saunders fight and I thought Canelo won it really easily. I know some people gave Billy Joe a fair amount of rounds. I actually didn't. I thought sort of two or three max was
I
the
think one or
fairest.
two, yeah. There was a
Yeah,
couple, one or two where he was all right.
but the actual rounds where he did well in the sort of middle stages, where he started to disrupt Canelo's flow a little bit and disrupt his rhythm, was with in and out movement. And now there's
Mm.
not many fighters in the world, if any, better than Bivol with that kind of in and out footwork. It's his game. It's something that's quite unique to him. And then you look at the Kovalev fight where he had real success with kind of the long straight punches, the reverse one,
Mm.
two, the jab. That's something Bivol does very well as well. So a lot of kind of the areas of success we've seen against the recent version of Canelo, with Bivol's going to do, and he's going to do it to a higher standard, in my opinion, than a Billy Joe. I think he's a much better athlete than Billy Joe. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
he's a better, he's more durable at this point than Kovalev was at that stage as well. So this is a really really tough challenge.
Do you think, in a way, though? And I heard a few people say this, and I kind of can see where they're coming from with this. Pretty much, Bivol won that title in 2017. He's been
Hmm.
champion for a long time.
Yeah.
His best win, Joe Smith, which was a good win, but he's really not fought. It's not been elite level. And as I said, he's kind of always been in third gear. You think there's a risk spent that long amount of time fighting the guys, meeting the guys at their own level? Do you think maybe he's kind of almost stuck in gear at this stage, and that could maybe translate itself in the ring?
Yeah, and that's something that's been my biggest criticism of Bivol. Now, there's sort of two factors to it, really, and I did feel like that Joe Smith Jr. fight was the turning point because
Mm,
in one of those later rounds where he got hit on at the bell and then he sort of staggered back to his corner. Kind of ever since then, he's never quite taken the risks that he used to take. Now, is that because he got clipped quite hard and he didn't like it and he doesn't want that to happen again? Or is it more so the fact, and I think this does play a part, that he signed with Eddie Hearn, who I think promised him Canelo at some
mm,
stage? Did he just think, do you know what? If I'm fighting the likes of Craig Richards and Salamov, etc., I don't need to take a risk here. I'm going to play it safe and just be more mobile than sitting down on his shots and being a bit aggressive. But definitely as fans, and you've alluded to it, there's been opportunities in these fights where he's had the chance to just go through those gears and not really done it. And is it because that Joe Smith Jr. shot hurt him a little bit and he's become a bit gun shy and he's sort of worried about that? Or is it because he was just playing it safe? We won't really know till he gets in there. But we say it all the time, don't we, that we need
mm.
to see Plant Benavidez, then the winner fight Canelo. We need to see Billy Joe Callum Smith, then the winner fight Canelo. Sort of feels like Bivol might fall into that category as well, maybe.
I think so, and like we talk about the skill of Bivol, we need to like Canelo, his ability to adjust to what a fighter is doing in the ring. I think that people don't look into that as much as they do. I mean, yes, Billy Joe was able, like Canelo was winning the fight, but
Hmm.
when Billy Joe started with the in and out movement, Canelo was able to spot those little holes in Billy Joe's defense, and when it came time for it, his timing with that uppercut, which basically smashed his face,
Hmm.
was just was just brilliant. Canelo, even when an opponent is offsetting him, he doesn't panic. He doesn't get flustered, and he has a way of. I don't want to use this comparison, but almost Lomachenko-esque in a sense that he can just kind of download what his opponent is doing, and he's like, right, he's doing this here, here, here. Boom, I know what to do now.
Yeah, and the thing you make a great point there about the way he adapts and figures things out. He's such a smart fighter. But the thing for me as well is the conviction. He knows there's 12
Mm,
rounds of a fight. And one of the reasons I think Tyson Fury is so elite is no other heavyweight would have stood in front of Deontay Wilder to deliver the performance he needed to deliver. He had the confidence and the conviction to do it. Not sure AJ necessarily would have had that. You look at Usyk and standing in front of AJ and boxing with him and standing in front of Gassiev and outboxing. It takes a certain mindset and a
mm-hmm.
level of confidence to do that. And with Canelo Alvarez, he knows they're 12 rounds in a fight. So what he's done is early on, you'll see it in the first round of all of his fights nowadays, he'll hit you really hard with single shots. And his opponents go, whoa, right. Oh, I need to overcompensate. I need to be busy. I need to be up on my toe. And they start working ridiculously hard. And he goes, okay, I'll just keep
Yeah,
doing what I'm doing. I'll adapt to you. You can keep doing what you're doing. But there's 12 rounds of this fight. And when he gets to the final few, I know what I've got to do to get you out of there. And he's just such an elite finisher that he picks those shots perfectly. It's almost like everything slows down around him and he can find each single shot. Just a special fighter, Canelo. And I think because obviously some of the baggage that he carries with the Golovkin fights and the failed test, etc., he gets a lot of
mm-hmm.
hate, and being the best fighter in the sport, you do get hate. But we need to appreciate that he's a very good fighter and he can beat
He is.
Dimitri Bivol outright in this fight. A lot of people think, oh, Bivol's going to get robbed anyway if it goes to the scorecards. No, Canelo can beat him in this fight.
He definitely can. And here's the thing as well that I think that I've done it. I think we've all done it. We've mentioned the fact that Canelo gets, a bit of favor on the scorecards. Has he
Hmm.
actually, when you think about it over the last few years? I mean,
Hmm.
let's just look at Danny Jacobs. They had that fight close enough. There
Yeah.
was no loop-sided scorecard that didn't reflect the fight. Kovalev, they were close. Billy Joe, a couple of them judges had Canelo. They all had Canelo winning, but they had it close. The
Hmm.
planned fight, there was only really one winner in that fight, to be fair.
Hmm.
But if we look at some of the fights Canelo's been in, even the Callum Smith fight, one judge had it 170, 111 in a fight that Callum Smith didn't do anything.
He
So
didn't win a round.
he didn't win a round, but yet some judges found a way. So I kind of think when people say, Canelo gets the rub at the ground, like look at this, look at some of his recent scorecards. You tell me Callum Smith won 3 rounds. and then tell me Canelo gets the rub of the green. So I think maybe that's something his opponents maybe think about as well, is that like, oh, how am I going to get a decision? I need to overcompensate. When in actual fact, a lot of his scorecards, since he's pretty much left HBO, they've been a lot fairer.
Yeah, and when I talk about the conviction that he has in his performances and the confidence, the way he fights is a risky move because he almost tries to steal rounds in the sense that he lets his opponents throw more shots than him, but he purposely throws less but lands more and lands harder. The perfect round to sort of sum up what Canelo Alvarez is great at and why judges should score rounds to him is the first round of that Billy Joe Saunders fight.
Yeah.
Billy Joe Saunders threw way more shots. Canelo threw much less but landed more than him and landed harder, more significant shots. And I think the judges in America favor that. And ultimately, I think when you see fighters that are busier, sometimes people like that. They think, oh, he's throwing more punches so that he's the one in control. Listen, Canelo makes you miss a lot and he throws less than you, but he lands more than you and he lands harder than you.
Yeah.
It's efficient fighting. And some people don't necessarily score it that way, but I've genuinely thought in the Caleb Plant fight, the Callum Smith fight, the Billy Joe Saunders fight, I didn't have him losing many rounds across those fights at all.
No. And I admit, like you, I always tend to favour the cleaner, even if someone's getting outworked, but if they're getting battered with clean shots, you kind of got, unless the opponent is absolutely getting ragdolled in there, you got to give it to him. And Canelo over the years, people said he had stamina issues years back, even though he was cutting a lot of weight. He's really learned, as you say, how to pace a 12-round fight, how to work when he needs to, how to, look at the opponent, see what he's doing, know when to punch, know when to punch. And people talk about Bivol's jab. They don't talk about enough Canelo's head movement. I mean, Danny Jacobs has a good jab, a good long-range boxer. And that was a much fresher Jacobs than we have now. Couldn't land the jab on Canelo at times in that fight. Until Canelo slowed down later on in the fight, when the head movement slowed down, he couldn't barely land the jab on Canelo. His head movement is that good. That was at 160. And I think Canelo, even in 2019, outgrew that weight. I mean, he outgrew that weight when he was at 154. So we've got a much fresher, much fitter in his prime Canelo. And he's talking about going on for another 6-7 years. So he's not thinking 1 foot out the door. He's thinking, what's next?
Yeah, and the thing is with Canelo, we're talking about a completely different fight to the one from even the Jacobs and the Kovalev fight. He really has elevated since Golovkin, and it's when people say, he struggles with lateral movement. And look what Erislandy Lara did. His reflexes aren't that good. He could be boxed on the inside by Mayweather. That's a completely different Canelo. It's a different Canelo to the Golovkin fights. So yeah, we're looking at a special fighter here, and like you say, paces himself much better, and I think. Yeah, I'm definitely leaning towards him in this matchup.
Certainly. And I think that there's always going to be, even though I said we think we read too much into it, but there always kind of is that little bit of political thing with Canelo. I think that this is what he's looking at in this fight is his key ticket to undisputed light heavyweight. Obviously, we know he's got, if he wins this Triple G, I'll take it for what it is at this stage. Maybe Triple G can do something, I don't know. But if you think about it like this, he beats Dmitry Bivol, the winner of Joe Smith. Although I've heard the WBC say they're kind of hitting the miss whether they're going to sanction that because where Beterbiev's from. But let's just say that fight does happen. Literally, he can go to Top Rank next year and say, right, here I am, give me them. Yeah, so the way Canelo is chasing it.
And the beauty of being the number one guy in the sport is when you chase those fights, people automatically say yes because it's not a Spence Crawford situation where people argue is 50-50. They know that guy's the golden ticket, so they jump at the chance.
Yeah, there is literally no use trying to. I remember Bellew before. I think it was just after Callum Smith fought Ryder. He was like, "No, Canelo should come Liverpool. Callum Smith's
Anfield."
He's like, Callum Smith's the champion. It's like, mate, are you really trying to argue that Callum Smith is the ace? Against Canelo, that's reaching and then some.
Even Callum Smith wouldn't argue that, mate.
Even Callum Smith, even Joe Gallagher, who was his deluded, would have been like, Jesus, I'm not even that bad.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it's going to be a fantastic fight. It's crazy it's come so quick. But obviously, that's one fantastic fight we have to look forward to. Obviously, the weekend. The aftermath we're seeing the dust kind of settle now on Fury White. You've said that Fury did. You were more disappointed in White, and you thought that he made Fury look better than he did. And obviously, White. What are your thoughts on his excuse saying that it was the push that did all the damage? Even though I don't think his head even touched the canvas when he went down.
Yeah, so I got some sort of backlash for not being impressed by Fury, but again, I didn't say he performed badly. I said he performed, exactly as he needed to do. And the fact that he can win that fight in second or third gear really says a lot about how good he is. And I still think he's the number one heavyweight out there. My disappointment more came from Dillian White because the thing I don't understand is how you go over to Portugal, have a 12-week training camp. This is the fight of your life. You've campaigned for all these years. You've gone to court. You've taken legal matters. You've had all these issues. And he genuinely looked out of breath and out of shape after 3 minutes of action. And that was the thing for me that just felt like, I expected. The one thing I thought was if Tyson Fury schools him, it will be no fault of Dillian White's. He just won't be good enough. And it didn't really feel like that to me. So that was just my disappointment. I didn't think Fury performed badly. I didn't think Fury looks quite as physically fresh as he used to, but that comes with age anyway. There's a lot of fighters that don't look, once you get older, you lose that second of speed or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
So, and the excuses and stuff that you mentioned, I don't read too much into it. I just think after a performance like that, I'd probably go into hiding rather than trying to campaign for a rematch or planting my face on Sky Sports like Dillian has. So,
Frank was asked about the rematch, and he said that when he was younger, he wanted a date with Julia Roberts, but that he never got it. I'm sure that happened a lot with Frank Warren. I'd say he's immune to pepper spray now with the amount of women who sprayed him over the years. But Dillian White, I mean, I heard Hatman talk about it, and he said, look, a lot of these top fighters, they do look for a reason to explain the loss. But Dillian White's reasons, I mean, it's just, he said that the push was what caused mainly the damage. His head didn't even touch the ground, and he should have been let carry on. He was absolutely out of it the minute he stood up. There was no way he could have kept going. Do you think that Dillian White, he pretty much it's confirmed he's going to come back, but do you think he's going to stay with Eddie Hearn? Because he went straight to Sky for an interview. Eddie Hearn just basically said he was beaten by the better man, Fury. I think I'm not sure if he used the word outclassed, but he basically didn't even pull any strings and saying Fury just battered him. So I think that Dillian White and Sky is looking next move.
Yeah, and I feel that way as well. And you make a great point about him straight away going to Sky for the interview. I think that says a lot. And I kind of said in my own videos that there's always a need for a big name heavyweight, regardless of what stage they're at. And I think Derek Chisora really sort of shows that, to be honest, because he's a guy that's almost had like 10 careers in one, because he's just there's always been a need for a big name and a fighter like him. So I think Dillian won't be out of work at all. I do think Sky can't be picky about who they get on their platform at the minute. And I do think the one thing they do lack right now is big names. And I know Adam Smith has said before that he's got a great relationship with Dillian. There was a lot of talk before the purse bids with Frank for this fight that Ben Shalom was speaking to Dillian and trying to sign him, and he would represent him at the purse bids and things like this. So I do think that that's possible. The fight that sort of came to mind for me was I know they're trying to land something big for Fury. Do you run the narrative of Tyson's cousin in against Dillian, a bit of a redemption type thing or something like that? It's not a good fight, in my opinion.
No, I don't think it's a good fight at all.
Sky sometimes don't have an eye for a good fight. They just see names and narrative and they try and build it off that. So that's maybe a possibility, but I'm with you. I would be surprised to see him go back to Hearn right now.
So would I. I think their relationship, even though people always seem to kind of think they've worked together for years, they worked on a fight-by-fight basis, but there was always kind of seemed to be a different of opinion between the two. They never seemed to be best buds. Even though Dillian was making her money, there was always that kind of clash between both. You always kind of felt that there was a bit of tension behind the scenes with the two.
Yeah.
And I wonder as well, because Dillian White manages Alan Babbage, he manages Fabio Wardley, they're fighting on the zone at the minute. Would that, if Dillian White was to leave and go to Sky, would he take them with him? Because Babbage, now Wardley, he's there. That's the best way to describe him. But Babbage is a ticket seller. As far as we think he's going to go, he does put. But I always watch Babbage. I think most people do. That's another loss as well, if you think about it, for Hearn, if that does happen.
Yeah, there's some baggage there. I mean, I think Wardley would probably be safe because I mean, not to share his business, but he has posted it on Instagram, so I know he's actually dating someone that works at Matchroom. So I think he'd probably stay at Matchroom if it came down to it. But yeah, with Babbage, like you say, that it probably causes some friction there. Maybe that gets hard to if you have to liaise with Dillian White, for example, to get these fights secured for Babbage, does that become awkward? Bit of conflict of interest there. So I think you're right, and I'm sort of interested to see, like you say, they've never come across as really pally. Eddie's kind of had the Darren Barkers and the Cole Froch and the Bellews that are almost like they're like Bezzy mates, and they'd do anything for, and he'd go above and beyond to deliver them their dream fights.
He gives them jobs on the zone as well.
Yeah, and it's never really felt like that with Dillian.
No.
Like, it doesn't feel like the AJ relationship either. So yeah, I'm with you on it. Just doesn't seem like it's going to work.
I think next step for Dillian White, like I personally would kind of rather he left at this stage, because I feel like this, right? Deontay Wilder, people say he's got no chin. He took shot after shot from Fury before going down. White took one uppercut. Now, it was the way Fury threw it, it was a good shot, but I think White's punch resistance is gone. And I think the only fight I would logically see him in is the Chisora Rima trilogy. Sky would sell that as a pay-per-view. Probably fill out the O2 still at this day.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good point. That I kind of thought, well, Eddie's trying to deliver a fight for Chisora, and he's looking at overpaying an Areola or someone like that. But Chisora's not signed to any long-term deal with DAZN already. So Sky could easily turn around and say, you two, fancy a trilogy on Sky again for this amount of money, and both of them will jump at it, because again, Del Boy's not loyal to Eddie. I know he's had some big fights on there, but Del Boy goes where the money goes. So
yeah, he is literally a couple of million to fight Dillian White. Yeah, I'll take that. Exactly. I'll take that, no problem. On pay-per-view in the O2, yeah, why not? Dillian White coming off a loss and a knockout as well, he'd be like, yeah, I'll take that. At least I went the distance.
Yeah. Do you think Frank would, after all of this stuff that's gone down and the friction there between the two, if Dubois needed a big name in the UK to defend that regular belt, or if Joyce or Parker loses and needs a rebound fight, do you think he'd ever swallow his pride a little bit and work with him?
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking Frank should have been a little bit, probably, like, he should have been probably nicer to Dillian White and done a little bit more for him in regards. Dubois, I think, is fighting on the 11th of June in America, somewhere in America, against the guy, Brian. I mean, we all, like, Brian's garbage. I mean, he's an overweight heavyweight who's slow as anything. Dubois is going to absolutely kill him. But you have a world title shot, Dillian White, BT Sport pay-per-view. There you go. Your man's got a marquee win, in Dillian White. And Frank Warren has been, pushing Dubois since he turned over 5 years ago. For me, it just, from a matchmaking point of view, and I'd favour Dubois. Dubois is a tremendous puncher. I'd favour Dubois, and Dubois has, he's a good enough long-range boxer to bother Dillian White. He could definitely land on him. I just think that if you're a matchmaker looking to get your guy a name, looking to get him out there as, a bit of a star in British boxing, I mean, it's a no-brainer. Him against Dillian White for a world title, in inverted commas, makes so much sense.
Yeah, because I mean, who else do you match up Daniel Dubois with when he comes back to the UK after beating Brian? There's no real logical fight.
You're not going to put him in with the winner of Joyce Parker. I mean, he's already fought Joyce, and we saw how that went. And Warren has nightmares probably still about that. So it's a case of who do you, like, how you've got your title, but how in God's name are you can't really sell Daniel Dubois versus Nathan Gorman 2 for a world title. It's just not going to work. So I think that Frank Warren, he may very well need to swallow his pride, and he may need to overpay if he thinks Dubois is going to be, a good investment still. I think that's what he needs to do. And one thing I think Frank Warren missed a trick with was getting people like Dubois and Dubois and Yard out on the recent card there, just for a runaround. Didn't have to be anyone good. Give him a couple of grand, little runaround. At least it's names as opposed to just people we'd know, but the average card would be like, who the hell are these guys? Isaac Lowe and Nick Ball.
Yeah, and watching that card, obviously you did a live stream. Would it have been better to see, and just, think about being a promoter, would it have been better to watch Anthony Yard be quite impressive in destroying someone in a couple of rounds than watching that Esserman fight that really didn't set the tone for the main event? So, do you know what I mean? So they had an opportunity there to sort of bump up some of those names, I felt.
That's what I thought. I mean, like, Warren has some decent enough fighters when he wants to use them. And I think that was a real case of just, look, Yard's made a career beating journeyman. I mean, let him do it on Wembley Stadium and get Dubois a run around, co-main event. I mean, I'm sure you could have got like a heavyweight like a Marius Wack or someone like that, who would have took a couple of grand. There you go. Pop him in there, see if Dubois, he's shot now to pieces anyway, so Dubois wouldn't notice there. There you go. You've got you got your co-mains, and you've saved the bomb on it. They would have been happy just to be out in Wembley, and there you go. I think Warren really played a safety first with that card. They really
Yeah,
did, but
definitely.
he's probably got a smile from ear to ear now. Still, his guy
Yeah.
won. And
I don't know if you saw the whole Talksport interviews, some of the quotes you referred to. They actually asked him about Saturday night, and he said it was the best night of his career as a promoter, which actually sort of took me back when he said it, when you think of how long he's been in boxing. But he said Tyson Fury is his favourite fighter he's ever worked with, and it was the best night of his career. And I was like, wow. So yeah, he's probably riding a high despite, the disappointment from fans to some extent. He's really riding a
yeah,
high from
well,
Saturday.
I wouldn't mind, but he had to cancel the card this Friday. Do you remember he had the card on
Yeah.
this Friday to cancel that? I don't exactly know why, unless you heard the reason why he was.
So the one thing I did see was apparently they're going to move it to the undercard of Joyce Parker. Was one thing that I read was one of the possibilities. So maybe that's what the plan is.
I reckon the co-main on Fury White probably sold more tickets. And once that was done, probably the people were just like, "We want a refund. What are we going to pay for this for?"
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I'd imagine that was the biggest issue there. But do you think now that Frank Warren's done this, he's had this big standout event filled Wembley Stadium, that a lot of the fighters, because I think it's pretty much guaranteed MTK is going tits up, that a lot of
Yeah.
these will be really looking at Warren now and thinking, well, hang on a sec, Eddie Hearn, the zone is not where it should be. And not that we're happy about that. Obviously, I like the zone. You like the zone. Obviously, we like the brand and the idea. Maybe not the Punstry team. But do you think that they'll look and think, well, Eddie Hearn is still doing whatever. Warren's filling out stadiums. I'm going to sign with him. Going to get his. He can bring me places. I think Frank Warren has just shot himself back into the limelight in boxing.
Yeah, and I think the problem was with Frank for the last couple of years is signing with Frank Warren wasn't sexy enough. The BT
No.
shows aren't the bright lights, and they're a little bit grimy, and they're not. The commentary team isn't as young and as fresh as DAZN try and make it, or even what Sky try and do as well. Sky's really well promoted, and the broadcast and the production's very good. Frank's not really had that, so I think Saturday night with the ring walks and everything, I think that's a good way of trying to make boxing for Frank Warren sexy again. So maybe he'll get a few names off the back of the MTK and Probellum fallout.
I definitely think he will. I think at one stage Warren, it'd be just a case of, for young fighters, would have been like last resort, whereas now it's like BT Sport, Wembley Stadium promoter Tyson Fury. I'll sign with him.
Yeah, and Frank
So,
was actually saying apparently to Uma or IFL that they're extending the BT deal, which
is good for him,
Yeah,
It's
and there's been times where I thought, maybe BT look at the
that's
Avanesian Mets cards and
exactly.
thinks, what are we doing? But so, they seem happier than I thought they would be. So that's interesting.
Shout out to K Mills for the £18, but he says, "Do you think Frank could be on his way back to the top?" I mean, if you had said to me a year or even 2 years ago, even 2019, that Frank Warren would have a show on pay-per-view that done 90 plus thousand at Wembley Stadium, I'd have laughed at you. But he's done it.
Yeah,
So
and
I think
even
anything is possible.
you look at he's not just fighting Eddie now; he's fighting Sky, who are putting a lot of pressure on Eddie as well. So think if Frank can sort of piggyback a little bit off the pressure Sky are putting on Eddie as well, then I think he can sort of get back there.
Yeah. And he's hoping Fury doesn't retire. I don't think he is. I think I think Frank Warren would absolutely love Francis Ngannou for Fury to do another big a gimmick kind of fight with Tommy Fury and Jake Paul. He'd love. Frank Warren might be old, but he's kind of getting smarter to what's going on in the world of boxing, and he knows there's money to be made here. There's fans to come from this. The hell with it. I'll take some of these fights. And even though he would be the one who criticised people earlier for that.
Yeah, and Eddie Hearn has got a lot of stick in the past for the KSI Logan things, but if you're running a business, it makes total sense, and I've
It makes
always
perfect sense.
understood why they do those sort of things. So that's been Frank's problem, that he's been too, ignorant of those things, and it's really hurt his business and his numbers. He's got to take a risk at some of those things. I mean, Fury and Garn, Tommy Fury, Jake Paul, those things sell. I don't care what anyone says, they sell. So.
I mean, you'll hear people keep talking about Fury and Ngannou. I mean, me and you know how that will happen, but the average punter will just I remember this is when Mike Tyson fought Roy Jones. That was the night Dubois fought Joyce, and I remember going with my friends. They were saying the fight's on, and I was thinking they were all watching Joyce Dubois. It wasn't on when they were there. Like, oh no, we're waiting for the Tyson fight. I was like, there's a good fight on BT Sport right now, like, and it's better than this, and you don't know about it, but you know about Tyson Joyce.
Yeah.
So definitely, and see, Enda just there says Frank doesn't do women's boxing. He has started now. He signed Raven Chapman, a girl I had on my channel here about a year ago. So he's going down every avenue, I think, now at this stage. So she was actually meant to be on this show this week.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think Frank is probably a little bit more reluctant because he signed Nicola Adams and hoped that she was almost going to be like Katie Taylor, and it just never worked out.
She just didn't have the personality or anything, or even her style was very ugly as well. That was never gonna. It was never gonna work. That just was never gonna work. Raven Chapman's a much more outgoing character, and her style is a lot more fan friendly as well. So he might be onto something there, because I know Eddie Hearn he had her on a Matchroom show there last year.
Yeah, and the thing was, Eddie took a punt on Katie Taylor and it really worked out. Frank took a punt on Nicola Adams and it didn't. So you kind of saw why Eddie exploded into women's boxing and went full force and Frank didn't. But I think he's realised now he needs to, because it's a good way to top up cards and there's some really good fights to get involved with now. So
cheap
I
as
think
well.
Frank will get on. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think Frank will get onto it.
In terms of the fight that's happening this week, there's the main fight that I'm really looking forward to. I know you're looking forward to. I can't wait for this fight. It is Shakur Stevenson, Oscar Valdez. Mate, I think this is going to be a coming of age fight for Shakur.
Yeah, I'm a massive Shakur Stevenson fan. I've
Brilliant.
got an awful lot of belief in him, and I've always felt like he'd have his Mayweather Corrales moment, and I feel like this is the fight to do that, in my opinion. And I don't want to dismiss Oscar Valdez's chances because he's a good fighter, but I honestly think Shakur is really, really going to put on a show, and his self-belief at the minute is just like
through the roof.
It's through the roof, and he's always been very confident, quite cocky. But in the Herring build-up, he came across a bit nervous at times, and he was acting a bit out of character and being a bit weird, and his nervous energy was there. With this one, I don't know if you saw the little face-off they did where he said to Valdez, "Don't go cheating," and like he's now found he's just matured a little bit overnight against Herring, and I think he's really coming into his own, Shakur, now, and I think we're looking at pound for pound number one in a few years.
The Herring fight, I couldn't believe how many people actually felt Herring would win, and Herring he was a good champion. Don't get me wrong, but the minute I knew Shakur was in line, I was like, Frampton or Herring, neither of these guys is beating Shakur. They're not even gonna. It's not even going to be a case of could Herring. It's like it's not going to be competitive, and it wasn't. And I'd have the same feeling about this fight. I think that Shakur really grew for me after his fight with Simeone. It begins with a V, but he'd only lost at that time to Quigg and Selby, both on points, taken out in a round by Shakur, who was only about 21, 22 at the time. That was really when he grew for me into a man. That was his kind of. He got his bit of man strength, and now he's just like he's gone from strength to strength since then. And I think he's going to absolutely batter Oscar Valdez this weekend.
Yeah, and I've seen it a few times with Shakur. I followed him in the amateurs, and I mentioned this story a lot. When he was in the US amateurs, the featherweight Ruben Villa, he was actually well ahead of Shakur, and he beat Shakur a couple of times in national tournaments. And then when it came to the Olympic qualifiers, Shakur really needed to produce something special to get into that Olympic team, which sounds crazy because he obviously got to the final against Robesi Ramirez. But, he went out and he beat Ruben Villa. And you look at where they've kind of gone since then. And Shakur really just doesn't get enough credits for some of the wins where perhaps he was a little bit unentertaining, but how dominant he was against Joet Gonzalez, Christopher Diaz, Nakathila that's knocked out Miguel Berchelt, Joet Gonzalez and Christopher Diaz that had fun fights against Navarrete. Shakur's got some good wins there that have kind of, with time, have got better as well. So I just think this kid is insane, yeah.
And this is at 130. I don't see him sticking at 130 very long. But even at 135, like I said, with the exception of maybe Lomachenko, and that's a maybe, but I still think Lomachenko proved me wrong. He's got plenty left in the tank. But like Kambosos, Haney, Garcia, I'd struggle to pick any of these guys over Shakur. Like seriously, even if now in the next year, I'm thinking Kambosos, no. Ryan, hell no, he'll get absolutely ironed out by Shakur. Devin, even him, I'm just thinking Loma's the only one I could look at, maybe think, maybe.
Yeah, Loma's the only one for me. And obviously, as time goes on, we don't know what's going to happen with his
Exactly.
situation. By the time they could fight, Loma really could have aged and it will be a good night for Shakur. But I just look at that 135 division and I honestly think Shakur could go up there tomorrow and take them all on. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the sparring footage with Devin Haney.
I've
Devin
seen little
Haney is a
clips of it.
really good fighter. Shakur just plays with him.
Yeah.
Shakur is just, he really is just, he's the closest thing I've seen to Floyd ever, since he left the sport, because he's just got some tools and skills that you just don't teach. You just have it or you don't. And I think Shakur's just of that mold.
In terms of round predictions, because I genuinely think he's stopping Valdez,
Mm-hmm.
and Valdez is not the hardest to hit. Valdez had a hard career, but you thinking earlier, like,
So if he does stop him, I think it would be late on in the fight. Shakur has got decent enough power, and lesser fighters have dropped Valdez when he was down at featherweight, and he's taken more damage since then. The thing is with Shakur, he's so accurate and so fast that it's just almost like, it's a bit like Loma where you just can't defend yourself. And against
yeah,
Herring, that's almost what it was. Herring was like, I can't physically stop you from punching me, so the referee is going to have to stop this fight. So I think it will be more a case of that. The one thing though with Valdez is, he kind of has that get out of jail card with the left hook that maybe Reynoso sort of keeps him in there. So it probably have to be the referee stepping in and feeling sorry for Valdez at this point. So I think a late stop of kind of, if I'm doing my betting this weekend, I'll sort of look between rounds 9 and 12.
I can't see it going any other way. I can't. And
Mm-hmm.
like, don't get me wrong, I like watching Valdez fight. It's not me coming across the way I don't like this guy. It's like I like watching Valdez. I think he's a good fighter, but Shakur just he. To be fair, when he turned over, I kind of thought he maybe a bit too soon because we only about 19, and he still
Yeah,
didn't.
yeah.
He didn't look quite settled. If you know, he kind of looked a bit kind of, because I know there was a lot of amazing. Can you believe this? When he turned over, it was like a month after Conlon, and there was a lot of talk like, "Ooh, who's the?" I was like, mate, what the fuck? Like, that is crazy. Why are you comparing the two? I know they're both with Top Rank. I'm like, it's like a chasm. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
chasm gap between the two. And just imagine if they'd ever fought, how bad that would have went for Conlon. You think Lee would?
Exactly.
That's like, you think
And
Lee Wood is bad.
yeah, and just the way Shakur as well, like you talk about the comparisons with Condon, even after the Olympic final with Robesi Ramirez, like when you look at where those two guys are at now, obviously Ramirez is finally settled into the pro game,
Yeah,
but
he
when you
has done.
look at where those two have gone since that final, Shakur is just, I mean, he's
It,
leapfrogged way and above even
it,
Ramirez, who's a good fighter.
it was 10 fights or a little bit more. It took Shakur. It didn't take him long.
Hmm.
It took him 2 years, 2.5 years to win a world title against
Hmm.
Gonzalez, who is a good fighter. Let's not. It wasn't like he got that title off some easy guy. You know, you've only been pro 2 years, but here's a weak champion. Go on and take that. It took that. Gonzalez is a good fighter. He was undefeated at the time, so it's not like Shakur's been fed easy touches. He's fought good fighters, and
Exactly.
I think by the time we finish his career, we'll look back and just be like, here, what did we have on our hands here? And I think a lot of
Yeah.
the fighters he beats, even if like Gonzalez, they'll get wins that will age well. I
Hmm.
think
Yeah,
that's what's going to
definitely.
happen. They'll get wins that will age well. And Conlon, the best believer in his own ability, in his own limited ability. Conlon's not a bad fighter, but I do think there was a lot. The hype around him when he turned over was unbelievable. Like watching him as an
Hmm.
amateur, I'll never forget the Andrew Selby fight he
Hmm.
had in the WSB, and I was like, this guy is not as good. Like I know that was a couple of years prior. I was like, this guy's not as good as they think he is. Like Andrew
Yeah.
Selby schooled him pretty much in that WSB fight. I was like, this guy is not gonna. He might do something, but he's not going to do what he thinks he's going to do.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of some of the other fights that we have on the horizon, there's not really been much of an announcement. You know, I think we've had that kind of good patch, and now we're waiting for things to get announced. Fight camp coming up. What do you think? Do you think Eddie Hearn's going to hold out for that before announcing more big fights? I know we've got Richards and um, Boatsi, but what do you think is going to hold? What do you think the future's holding for the zone now?
Yeah, this interesting fight camp because I kind of forgot about it a little bit in all honesty. Like it seemed like a cool idea, obviously during the lockdowns, it was a really cool idea. And then last year, I think there was still a place for it as things weren't fully back to normal. I do think perhaps it's lost its shine. Like, going into this year, I don't sit there and think of a lineup that would sort of interest me. I'm trying to sort
Yeah,
of think about his stable and who sort of due a fight around that point in sort of all honesty. Um,
I wouldn't be shocked if they do a Conor Ben. Like they end fight camp with Conor Ben fighting and having an easy fight just there, and they'll probably do something big. But who would that be against? I mean, I like Conor Ben. I think he's an improved fighter, but he is a long way. Like he is Avanesian, yes, but like gee, I mean, he is miles away from Boots or Virgil.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. I think, to be honest, I think Maurice Hooker's going to be next. I just don't. Eddie's one of
Mm-hmm.
those people that once he gets an idea in his head, he doesn't let it go until it happens or someone loses or something. I think Maurice Hooker's going to be next.
I genuinely think Conor Ben would fight if they announce tomorrow Avanesian. Even if they announce tomorrow Boots, he'd go in there full of confidence. He doesn't
Yeah.
strike me as he's not one of these fighters who, when he says he'd fight anyone, I believe him. But I do think that the team around him are just like, we are going to make as much money as we can out of you until we're going to be a bit like, do you remember Tyrell Biggs in the 80s, where it was
Hmm.
like, make as much money when he starts looking shaky, cash him out. And
Hmm.
I think maybe that's something that we might see. Make as much money out of him. And if he's fighting a guy like Maurice Hooker and he nearly loses, then cash him out against Boots or someone like that.
Yeah, I mean Eddie's definitely looked at Joshua losing to Usyk and thought, "Oh, I need another star here because they're fading quickly." Dillian White loses to Tyson and goes elsewhere. You know, Anthony Joshua potentially loses again to Alexander Usyk. I need a backup plan here. So I
There
think
really
that's why he's
isn't.
been so careful.
There really is no one else he has other than Ben if AJ loses. Because I think if another loss for AJ, even if he comes back, that will write him off. I don't think
Mhm.
we'll see. I think a lot of the fans will just say bye bye for him. And Conor Ben is really it then, if you think about it. I mean, who else has he really got? Warrington's not going to be around forever, and he's really kind of in that Leeds kind of upper England kind of place. So who do the zone have moving forward that could actually step into they'll never step into I don't think anyone will ever reach AJ in terms of hype. I mean, for me, it was crazy. I never seen anything like it. But
Mhm.
even if you get close to that, you're doing well. I
Yeah.
don't see anyone. I literally don't see anyone on the horizon that Eddie Hearn has stepping into that role.
Yeah, and when you think about when you say actually who is there for DAZN, I've kind of always felt that as long as Eddie had Canelo, he'd be satisfied. Well, even look past this year, the names that would then be available would be Beterbiev, Benavidez, Charlo. I mean, Charlo and Benavidez are PBC, nothing to do with Hearn.
Mm-hmm.
Beterbiev is ESPN, nothing to do with Hearn. So those are kind of the three names that you would expect for him to face. Even some of the sort of names outside of that, if he wanted to take on Andrade, Eddie seems to have washed his hands with him as well. So
Mm-hmm.
Eddie could lose Canelo as well next year for 12 months or whatever. A fighter may come through that eventually gets him back on the zone. But just when you look in the UK, for me, and this is one of the reasons I think Eddie really made a mistake by going big on Yafai and being proud of it, is Yafai is a good fighter, but
Yeah.
listen, those divisions, as much as I love them and I try to put as much shine on them, and they're my favorite divisions, they're ultimately never going to get as big as the bigger divisions do. So the fact that he didn't try to go for, a Fraser Clark that ultimately doesn't have the talent of Galal Yafai, but will have
Will
more,
sell.
yeah, will sell better. And I just think, you look at that, the sort of the Olympians, and I know some of them may become available now because of MTK and Probellum, but I really do think when you look at Lauren Price going over to Sky as well, that's another
I
one he
know.
really missed out on.
I noticed that as well. I noticed so many of them jumping ship and going to Sky, and Karis. I can't pronounce her last name, but she
Art
went to
still,
Sky
yeah.
as well. Thank you. She went to Sky as well. A lot of them were going to Sky. They're finding homes there, or some of them. I mean, who knows with Probellum? I mean, maybe they'll just change their name and discreetly. We're not Probellum anymore. We're BLM. There you go. Don't ask any questions,
Yeah.
and their fighters will still be there. But I think that it showed me when the 2016 Rio cycle was over and like 90% went to the matchroom, and this cycle's ended, and like you could count on one hand. You got your fight, and I think that he's pushing your fight too fast
Mhm.
because he looked good in his last fight, but he's getting tagged a lot. He can't. I don't think with Galal you can move him too quick. I think he needs a little bit of time just to get his feet wet. But I think Hearn is kind of in a position where it's like I have to move him quick. I have no
Yeah.
choice, and there's killers in them divisions, man. I mean, they are. There's not, and a lot of them guys can go through the weights in them
Mhm.
divisions, and there's just absolute sharks in those divisions. I just don't. I don't think as good as he is, and he's a good fighter. I don't think it's going to end well the long
No.
run for him. And as
And
you
that
said, they're never in Japan, yeah, but not worldwide.
Yeah, there are a lot of unknown killers as well, which Eddie, a bit like a Mauricio Lara, won't expect to be up to much, but then they get in the ring and they're much more
There's a
dangerous.
fighter he could work with,
Mhm.
Mauricio Lara. You know, if he could sign him into a deal, you know, Lara is a good fighter. A lot of these Mexican fighters are very good fighters. They might have a loss or two. Um, Marquez had losses before the Pacquiao
Mhm.
fights. You know,
Mhm.
he'd lost, I think, in Mexico at least at one stage anyway.
Mhm.
And still, we all know who he is. I think some of them unknown Mexicans, when they turn out to be a revelation, you get them signed because they can do a lot of work for you. They can help you, even if you're based in the UK mainly. They can help you a lot.
Yeah, and going back to sort of the Olympic cycle, I mean, this Olympic team that's just gone at Tokyo was our most
Much better,
successful team for
much better.
years. You're absolutely going to have a lull after that. And when I look at this crop of fighters, like when I look 4 years before Tokyo, I looked at the sort of McCormacks, etc., the Yafais, and sort of thought, okay, these guys can medal. These guys are going to be competitive. They're going to turn over, and they'll be decent pros. I look at this current crop, and don't get me wrong, there's some decent fighters, but ultimately it's going to be a very, very weak Olympic class in the next class for Eddie Hearn to look at. So I think he's
Mm-hmm.
missed out by going big. His one saving grace, and I don't think he's going to be capable of pulling it off at this stage, but the Anthony Joshua link may help. I've said time and time again, and I did videos on it around the Olympics. The biggest star in that GB team is Ben Whitaker.
Mm-hmm.
Eddie Hearn honestly has to empty the bank to get him because he's the one that really could turn into a star because a lot of people aren't going to like him. He went on Sky Sports the other week and watched the Brad Ray fight and went, "God, he's not very good. Yeah, I reckon I could beat him right now." And he's very cocky. He's very arrogant. He's going to divide opinion, but he's flashy. There'll be people that like him. He knows how to promote himself. Eddie has to get him because if
Yeah.
he doesn't,
It,
he's missed out on all the ones he should have signed.
I think Hatman said it, and I agree. I think he's lost touch. I
Yeah.
think going to the zone. I think the success with Sky, he let that go to his head. He didn't think I've got this massive corporation behind me, which is helping me with the marketing and everything. I'm doing it all on my own. It's all down to me. It's not anyone else. And now it's like, right, well, you're on your own now. It's like, ooh, wait a minute.
Mhm. Yeah.
I've got no help here. And I think he's really starting. And I think as well as that, there's no characters with the zone. Like with the zone, you look at it, and it's. I've said it before. It's so bland. You know, Andy had a great job. I don't really mind Laura Woods to be honest. She's all right,
She's
but
good. Yeah.
the rest, it's just like I mean, Hatman summed it up best when Carl Froch makes a joke and says all Amir Khan's good for is getting knocked out, and then you're being told, oh, you can't say that. I mean, like by Bellew, it's like Bellew, you're the one who started rows with David Hay with Wilder's
Mhm.
brother, and you're telling him that's too much. It's like,
Yeah.
mate, come on,
It's like
come on.
a mates club. Eddie just sort of gives his mates jobs that need something after boxing. And whilst that's good because some
Oh,
of
it's
them obviously need it, but some of them just aren't the right people to talk about the sport. Just because you did the sport doesn't make it right. I mean, for anyone that watches football is listening to this, Paul Merson is one of the least knowledgeable people you ever meet on football. Great footballer back in his day, but it doesn't always translate. So yeah, I think the way you and Hatman have described it is, the way he's lost touch. I think that's the perfect way to sum it up.
he's lost touch, and I think people like Ben Shalom, even like I know that the links to a Pro Bellum, but the actual concept is brilliant.
Yeah, yeah, I'm
Brilliant.
with you.
I mean, like it's a wicked concept. It really is, and if it had if they turn around and Richard Schaefer was kind of like the front man for them, if they could find a way because they've got such a good stable. I mean, and I heard a few rumors about things they were looking to do, not even in the actual sport in terms of fighting, but just to make it more accessible for fans.
Hmm.
If it had gone, if they carry on, if they can find a way, I think they are going to be they're a game changer. They're a
Yeah.
proper game changer. So that's
And
one of the reasons why I was upset here and like, oh no, Probellum.
yeah, and when I look at what Ben Shalom's doing as well, like, there's been a lot of honesty there, and I think he's trying to break the mold of promoters being sort of sleazy and sort of
Yeah.
booed at events and stuff. He's trying to break that mold. But I just look at the way he's sort of trying to build that brand, and I look at those kind of boxer tournaments, almost like when Eddie came into the sport and was
But
doing the
that's it. That's what he was
prize
doing.
fighters and stuff. And I watched that boxer tournament and sort of thought it's a bit lower level than the boxing I usually enjoy watching, but I watched it and just thought, that was fun tonight. I enjoyed that, and I think Ben's the one that's really in the position now to sort of really put a target on Hearn's back and try and get the best out of him.
I have to say, Ben Shalom, I was a bit like that when he came around, but he's really grown on me as a promoter. And I think the way he handled the Josh Taylor situation, that to me was just, he handled that like a professional.
Exactly. Yeah.
He really did. I mean, he handled that situation like a pro. And you kind of wonder if Josh Taylor was Eddie Hearn's fighter and Eddie Hearn was really building him, he probably would have said, "Oh yeah, it's bad," but he wouldn't have been as straight up and honest as Ben Shalom. Ben Shalom just like, "I'm embarrassed about this. This is a disgrace." Eddie Hearn would have been like, "Oh yeah, it's unfortunate. Maybe we'll do a rematch somewhere else in the UK." Or he wouldn't have really. He would have just kind of tried to kind of shy away a bit from it. Whereas Shalom was just like, "Nah, this is BS."
Yeah, I mean Eddie always does that where he goes, "Oh, I thought it was a close fight, you know. I need
Yeah,
to go back and watch it." I always think the one that annoyed me the most was the Callum Smith John Ryder one, where he goes into the changing rooms afterwards, and Charlie Sims, Darren Barker, Chris Lloyd, they were all fuming, and Eddie sort of walks in nervously and went, "I thought it was close," and they all like uproar, and he's like, "Oh, I don't know what to say." Like, just call it how it is. It's yeah, annoying.
I think I think that's the problem with this one as well. I think it's just been like Sky. It's been like imagine going from Sky and thinking it can get better. Oh, you think that, but
Yeah,
waiting, you're in for a shock if you think it's going to get better.
yeah,
So I hope, I hope. I look, I like the zone as a concept. I hope it carries on, and I just hope Eddie Hearn takes a little bit of humble pie, swallows his pride, and says, "What do I need to do? Who do I need to get rid of? Who do I need to get in?"
hmm
They want Carl Froch, Carl Frampton. Fine, checkbook out. Come over here. You don't want Chris Lloyd and Tony Bellew. Sorry, lads, I love you, but we'll have to find something else for you. Maybe we'll get you on an online show. Maybe we'll stick you on the YouTube channel. We'll find something for you, but just not live.
yeah, exactly. I'm with you.
So, mate, I think that's pretty much everything I needed to cover.
Cool.
I would have kept you on a bit longer, but I think that the stream is getting a bit glitchy now. But we can chat for a bit backstage, and I can sort this out then.
Sure
But
thing.
is there anything you want to finish off with?
No, thank you for having me on as always, mate. Good to see your channel always growing and the numbers doing well. I'm glad your documentary done well as last week as
Yes,
well,
I'm
because I
so
know you
happy
put a
with
lot of
that. It
time
took
into
so
that.
much
But
work into it, my God. And
exactly.
the more I grow, the more I could bring people like you along with me. That's the plan.
Yep.
Hopefully
Look,
this is giving you something, give you, even if it's only gets you 10 subscribers or even whatever, as long as it gets you something, mate, that's the main thing. But people,
absolutely.
I'll leave it with there. I pinned the comment at the start, so if you haven't, Punch Perfect Boxing, Jamie, great guy, great lad, absolutely brilliant channel. I absolutely think it's fantastic. And definitely next time around, I'll have to go on yours after your trip.
Yeah, definitely. You'll be on here after Vegas for sure.
Anytime, man. Anytime. But people, I'll talk to you for now. Peace. Cheers, mate.